My name is Alf Hornborg. I'm an anthropologist to begin with, but I have been professor of human ecology at Lund University in Sweden since 1993. And human ecology is a transdisciplinary field where we try to communicate over disciplinary boundaries. But like I said, I'm an anthropologist to begin with. This is the second day of a conference I'm participating in here in Paris, and the conference is called Thinking the Anthropocene. And today, the venue is the Institute of Human Paleontology in Paris, which is a fascinating and quite relevant place to be for this discussion on the Anthropocene. Yeah, the theme of this conference is the Anthropocene, and it is an important concept that requires to be considered very carefully. We need to be very careful about using it because I think it can have strongly ideological functions. Well, a lot of people have realized, of course, that when we talk about the Anthropocene, the age of humanity, it sounds like it's the human species that is put at center stage. And I think it's very important to remember that the global environmental changes that we are seeing and that has given us reason to talk about the Anthropocene, they are being generated not by humanity as a collective, but by an elite, a global minority whose economic interests are driving this development. So this is one of the reasons why I think we have every reason to be careful when we use the word Anthropocene. The Anthropocene narrative acknowledges that human society and social organization has a tremendous impact on what used to be known as nature, on the material circumstances of human existence and the existence of other life on Earth. But strangely enough, while it is an acknowledgement of the role of society, it seems like the narrative itself is very strongly dominated by natural science. So, although it is an acknowledgement of social factors, the story is being told from a natural science perspective. We see it's not called the technocene, for example, or the econocene. It's called the Anthropocene, which makes it sound like a biological, geological phenomenon rather than a societal and economic and technological phenomenon. And in this sense, you could say that the problems that we're facing globally in the Anthropocene have been, in one way, denaturalized because we are recognizing the role of social structures and social exchange. But in the next moment, the whole story is renaturalized. It becomes a story told by Earth system scientists, natural scientists, about the human species, as if it was a biological phenomenon in human evolution or in the evolution of life on Earth, rather than see it as a political and social phenomenon. The way I see it, the social sciences have been abandoning the playing field in a way. It has become very common nowadays to talk about the dissolution of the boundary between society and nature, not only in an analytical sense, but also, I would argue, in an ontological sense. Because I think it's very important to maintain an analytical distinction between society and nature. Otherwise, we will not be able to talk about, for example, power and other phenomena that the social sciences have been working on for centuries. If we simply abandon the idea of the social, we're going to have to abandon a lot of very important and significant social theory that we have been developing in the social sciences for centuries. So I think it's very important to maintain the domain of social science. I think this is one important thing. But on the other hand, the social sciences do need to integrate and incorporate understandings about the biophysical dimensions of social systems. For example, economics, the science of economics, will have to look at things like flows of matter and energy, the creation of entropy, and so on. These are concerns that now lie beyond economics, but they need to be integrated. So basically, I'm arguing, if we are beginning to understand the planet in a post-Cartesian way as being composed of both social and natural dimensions, we should apply this also to our understanding of the social systems that have brought us here. We should understand that the global social system that emerged, say, at the time of the Industrial Revolution about 250 years ago, has been both material and symbolic and social. And we need to combine our understandings of these two dimensions of reality in order to have as full an understanding of the global system, the world system, as we have of the planet. So I've co-edited a book called The World System and the Earth System. I think we need to understand both dimensions, both the biophysical aspects of the planets and the political and social and economic aspects, and they are tightly integrated. But we need to maintain the analytical distinction between the material and the social. Ever since the Industrial Revolution, it seems like everybody has been looking for technological solutions. I mean, the Industrial Revolution itself was a technological solution. And ever since then, it seems like all ideologies, whether red or green or blue or brown, they've always been asking for new technology. And this applies today as well. Not only the Earth system scientists who are talking about geoengineering or carbon capture and storage, but also the environmental movement talking about photovoltaic, solar power, biofuels have been popular some years back, and so on. There's always a search for technological solutions, technological replacements for fossil fuels. I think we shouldn't be looking in that direction at all. My point is that technologies are products of exchanges in the world system that are fundamentally based on exchange rates, differences in prices of labor and resources in different parts of the world system, and the whole concept actually of money. And this may be the most difficult part to grasp. I would argue that the entire dilemma of the Anthropocene basically boils down to the idea of money. The idea that everything is exchangeable for everything else. This is why we can cut down rainforests and buy Coca-Cola for the money. We can exchange rainforests for Coca-Cola. This is why the industrial core economies of the world can continue to exchange spent resources, for new resources, because the finished products are spent resources. So in a way, the more oil we have dissipated today, the more oil we will afford to dissipate tomorrow because of the exchange relations in the world system. And this is all because of the idea of money. So basically, I would argue that what we need to do is to transform the monetary system and accept perhaps two different kinds of money for different kinds of activities. I think this is a way of of breaking the destructive logic of general purpose money, as we say in anthropology, the kind of money that makes everything exchangeable for everything else. We probably need one kind of money for local services and products necessary for our survival, and perhaps another currency for the globalized market with things that have to be produced with a global division of labor. And if I think we need to make that kind of distinction between the local and the global, which is a matter not only of different kinds of currency, but also a matter of perhaps having two separate identities, a local identity and a global identity. We shouldn't have to choose between being local and cosmopolitan, but rather, as human beings, we all need to have one foot in the local, in a place, in a landscape, and the other foot in this globalized world of the internet, where hopefully in the future, what we will exchange with other continents is information rather than matter and energy. I think Marxism, in a way, foreshadowed much of this by being a very holistic theory that, I mean, in the word production, of course, you have nature and the biophysical realities included. So I think fundamentally Marxist theory is very useful. But I don't think we necessarily have to be 100% Marxists, because there are issues in Marxism that deserve to be discussed, like the labor theory of value, and not least the optimism about technology, which some Marxists recently have said was not at all Marx's legacy, but at least the way it developed for many, many years, Marxism was associated with technological optimism. And I think that is a part of the Marxist framework that needs to be abandoned. I think the fundamental ideas in Marxism dealing with unequal exchange now is important to build on. In Marx's work, it was basically the unequal exchange of embodied labor, of course. But we have seen recently some work on the unequal exchange of embodied land, which is basically what the ecological movement is all about. And we're seeing some eco-Marxists now merging questions of labor and land as being resources for capital accumulation. But I think there's still some important analytical work remaining to be done regarding how to conceptualize unequal exchange. I don't think, for example, that it's useful to say that natural resources are underpaid, that they have a use value that could be measured somehow in money, and then you can reach the conclusion that they have not been paid sufficiently. I think that is the wrong way to go about it. I think we need to look at asymmetric transfers of biophysical resources that occur in the world system. So that, I mean, we know that every city like Paris, for example, has a tremendous ecological footprint. There's always a net transfer of resources to every city. It's been like that for thousands of years. And we need to look at these net flows of resources rather than just look at money. And this is the whole problem that economic science, which is fundamental to all policy decisions, all politics, is all about measuring money, but very, very little, if at all, about measuring flows of matter, energy, embodied land, embodied labor, the production of entropy, all these biophysical things that natural scientists can tell us about, but that social scientists and economists in particular have ignored for hundreds of years. First of all, I must say that I do not believe that the current predicament of humanity will be solved by individuals buying fair trade or ecological products. I don't think we can solve it solve things at the individual level. We need political decisions. But I think that in order to get the kind of political decisions that we require to survive the Anthropocene, we probably need more financial crisis. We need to have governments realizing that there is a crisis and it shows up in the money system. And then maybe they will start talking about changing the monetary system. I think at the current moment, politicians will not want to talk about these things because they seem too imaginative and too far off, too abstract. But the moment that we're suffering real problems in terms of food security, energy supply, and so on, I mean, the kinds of metabolic problems that strike civilizations just before they collapse, historically, then maybe the politicians will be able to talk about more relevant things. And to be more concrete, my suggestion would be that a nation state like France or Sweden could actually reach a decision to print an alternative, a complementary currency, which they distribute every month to every household in proportion to the size of those households, which can only be used to purchase local products and local services. Now, let's say, just to give an example, that for the average household, you would receive coupons, let's call them coupons, that would be equivalent to about, say, 300 euros if you used euros. Would you, as a household member, throw them away? I don't think so. Because you would be able to free up 300 euros of your regular salary by using that money to buy local food, building supplies, childcare, and so on, the kinds of services and goods that can be produced locally. Now, what would the rationale of this be? The rationale would be to drastically increase the demand for products and services that are locally produced. And it would radically decrease the demand for long-distance imports. And logically, this would mean that the amount of fossil fuels used for transports of food, for example, in the world system would be radically reduced. So if a nation state, if a government would really like to reduce carbon dioxide emissions radically, they could print coupons that can be used for local consumption and distribute them to the households. It's strange, I will be 60 next year. So I was thinking about these things in the early 70s. And in a strange way, I feel fantastic. Finally, so many people are realizing that the world we're living in is unsustainable. It doesn't mean that I'm happy. Because I have 3 grandchildren, and you know, they'll probably be around 80 years from now, and I'm worried about what kind of planet we will leave to them. But it seems like the Anthropocene narrative, with all its defects, ideological and other, have at least raised awareness among many, many, many people in important places about the fact that the way we live now in Europe and North America and so on is unsustainable, and we have to do something about it. That is a good feeling, even if I'm just as worried as everybody else.